What's up, everybody? It's Brendan Housler with EVOQ Bike. Greg Henderson is on the podcast today. So for the two people of you that don't know who Greg is, we totally did not even do an intro because we just started chopping it up, and I kind of forgot to do it because I'm a little starstruck. It's Greg Henderson. I mean, world champion, been to all these grand tours, leading out the best riders in the world tour. He's coaching. He has a physiology degree. This man is cycling. There is so much in this podcast, from everything that new pros can do to get better to amateurs, all of us in between. I don't know how you intro Greg Henderson. It's Greg Henderson. I'll leave you with that. Enjoy the podcast. Greg, thanks so much for taking time to do this, man. This was awesome. Looking through the staff squad, and it's like all Germans and you. Do you speak German, or do you guys all speak English, or how does that shake out?
Yeah, no, it's English. Obviously, the Germans speak very good English, but it sort of came about, like, I know when Greipel first retired, he was good mates with them and did a couple of races with them, and then it all sort of came about last minute. Like, we had a really good team with Black Spoke, and then October last year we got told it wasn't going to continue, and everyone was scrambling. It was like, oh, what are we going to do? And this came through, and they have this 3-year plan. They had this 3-year sponsor with a long-term plan. So I was like, yeah, I'm really keen to get involved, and Gripe was keen to get involved over the next couple of years as he sort of calms down, not as busy as he is at the moment. So no, it's quite a cool project, and it's I quite enjoyed being sort of grassroots, like starting off the project and seeing where we can take it. Mm-hmm. So it'll be quite fun. And and the thing I like about the Germans, I mean, I've worked with them obviously on the bike a lot. I was with T-Mobile also many years ago, but you just know where you stand with the Germans. I'll tell you straight, and I like that because I'm a straight shooting guy as well. So yeah,
you seem like a straight and shooting guy. We actually crossed paths in a bike race many years ago that you probably don't even remember. It was called, it was in Georgia, I want to say, Fort McClellan Road Race. And you were straight shooting to some people during the race. And I think you were on Sky at that point. Or no, you were on UHC at that point. And I was like, dude, nobody mess with this guy, Greg, because he's just going to shoot somebody out. So I was like, the personality was shining through. It was pretty awesome to see.
What was this? Shouldn't them in free passengers or something, was he? I don't know.
A little bit of that, yeah.
We don't take too kindly to that, do we?
Oh my God, it's hilarious. That's amazing. I was actually curious. We had Ethan Batt, who was on Black Spoke, was on the podcast. I actually met him when I came over to do Tour of Southland in like pre-COVID 2018 maybe. So I knew some of those guys, and it's interesting to hear. I was curious when a team sort of folds quickly, like you guys didn't even know about it. So everyone is just sort of shocked at the same, like riders, staff. It's just, yo, we're done.
It was really sad actually, because I was on Israel for a few years, and I really struggled on Israel because I just didn't like the direction it was going, and you sort of had no input, and if you tried to voice your opinion, they didn't like it. And so I left there, and I found the love for cycling again, with this team and these bunch of bike riders that were like me as a kid that just wanted to win. All they wanted to do was race their bikes and win, find a way to win. And if we didn't win, how can we win next time we race? Always looking for these small improvements. And then the other cool thing was, like, a bunch of Kiwis and a couple of Brits. We all get on. We have the same mentality of racing, just get in and do the hard work. So I was quite sad when it all ended, because just every race we went to, we seemed to just grow as a team. The results got better, and then we were attracting more and more riders. Like, there was I can't tell you how many CVs landed on my desk, asking for a job next year because they just loved the vibe that our team was putting out. And then unfortunately, the big financial backer, Murray, we don't even know exactly what happened. It's just he just said, "Oh, we can't do it again," and he didn't understand cycling enough to know mate, you could have told us in July, you know, like, or end of July, beginning of August, so we have time, because the cycling seasons don't work like January to December, as you know. You know, you've got to, if you're trying to look for a job in October, you're going to struggle. And a lot of riders did struggle, you know, and a lot of riders, a couple have retired and a couple have moved on, you know, and then, everyone sort of just scrambled. And, you know, I tried to help as many as I could. I got a couple of guys on the team with me. Got a couple of staff jobs as well, because you've got to remember, I got my mechanic, I got him a job, and I got 2 soigneurs jobs. So you're sort of not just looking after yourself. It's like you're trying to help other people as well. Yeah, you feel really, really bad. So it was just the thing that was really upsetting is just how much I found the love for the sport again. You know, I got out on my bike. I looked forward to going to races. I was back training and enjoying it, you know, and it was good for me. It was really good for me to go there.
What did cycling become just a job at some point? Because it sounds like when you were a kid, it was super passion, like race bikes, ride bikes, let's get better. But then you said you like rediscovered the passion. What was the lull, or where in your path do you feel like we're maybe questioning your involvement with it? Or can you go on that? It's interesting to hear from, I mean, a guy like you. And let me just, dude, there are people that come on this podcast, not to blow smoke at you every once in a while. It's like, where do I even start with a guy like Greg Henderson? Like, cycling is your life as it comes across. Like, you've just been in the depths of every aspect. It's like, it's mind blowing. You've forgotten more than most of us will ever learn. So to hear like the waves of passion, you know, so many athletes kind of go through this. What was your maybe lower point of it, where you're just like, I don't love this?
Yeah, it was definitely when I was on Israel. It was just not being listened to and just being treated like I knew nothing about the sport. And it's like, well, I actually have a lot to give. I know I do. And yeah, I was picked up originally on Israel for my, I came on as a coach. I was coaching Rick Zabel, was coaching Greipel. So, you know, I've got a exercise physiology degree. So it's like, I was in my wheelhouse there, and I was organising this sprint train that we had. We had, you know, Alex Dowsett and Taze Brandley. We had this powerhouse. We had this train, and I built this train, and then it was just sort of every race you'd go to, the DSs wouldn't listen. They wouldn't implement it, because I'm not in the car. I'm doing it on course. I'm in front of the race, giving details on VeloViewer of, you know, what's the fastest side of the road. We should go through this roundabout on the left side because, you know, it's faster. So I'm giving all these technical details, and the riders are going, we hear nothing. It was just time and time and time again. It's like, and it just got to the point where it's like, I'm beating my head against the brick wall here. So it was, and, you know, I was there for 3 years, and it was like, I just didn't love it, you know. And it's like, well, why are you doing it if you don't love it? You know, and then, I moved on from there, and you had a quick chat to Scott Guyton, who was the GM at the time, and he was more than happy. They were expanding as a team, so they needed another DES. I went and did my DES course, so I could actually have some influence on the radio in the car, you know, because just, you know, it was definitely one of my attributes to road cycling was my ability to read a race and you know, manufacture a result somehow. You know, it was like always thinking in the car, how are we going to win from this situation? Or we're in a bad situation right now, right, what do we do? How do we correct this situation? So it was just almost relaying what I would do on the bike as an athlete, but not at 180 heart rate, just sitting in the car and having more time to think about it. So actually some of my calls were probably, you know, more just and a bit more accurate.
That's amazing. Can you teach people how to read a race, or do you feel like that's just this innate thing a skill set that certain riders have more so than others?
No, I think you can 100% teach how to read a race. You know, and when you do these smaller races, which are quite fun with the younger guys, the 2.2s or the 1.2s, you're not allowed race radios. Mm-hmm. So you can sit down, you can make a plan, you know, the night before or the morning of. You show them some sections of the race that, you know, potentially could be open to crosswinds or some some climbs coming to, position here is important, or some narrow road, just the normal stuff that they might have overlooked. But then they're on their own, then they have to know, okay, they have to go through the velo view or check out the parkour, and they have to know at kilometre 70, there's a chance. So they have to learn that sort of thing. And the debriefing after a race is very important. And then, of course, once the radio comes in, again, like I'm sitting in the car, I've done the research on every race, every stage, so I can feed them information. 5 gates, guys, we turn left. Potential crosswinds. I can give them all that information. So it sort of takes a little bit of thinking out. The one thing I would say, interestingly enough, and it's come up for discussion quite a few times, is you can't actually teach that ability in a bunch sprint on how to surf and how to find and how to, you can train all day long, smash out 1,800 watts or 1,500 or whatever your number is in the sprint, but that ability to be able to find the front, to get to the front without having used all your matches, that's very, very hard to teach, and that just comes with doing it time, and that comes with repetition. You learn from your mistakes, what I'll do wrong here. And so the one thing I always teach the young guys is the way you learn this is you have to change your mindset and go, I always say position over power. And so what does position over power mean? It means get in the position that you are able to sprint from, like top 5 position. You have to be within the top 5 at 200 or you've got no chance these days. Position over power. Like it might have cost you a lot of energy to get that position, and then when you go to stand on it, you might not have anything. There's a chance that you've used too much energy to get your position, but it's more important to get your position than have brilliant legs and be in 15th place and do a great sprint. Go, I did a great sprint. I got 7th. I came from 15th. Yeah, that's amazing. The reason I teach that is because eventually, if you keep repeating this, you'll find a way that one day it's going to happen, and you're going to arrive in position with power. You're going to have got there so easy, and you're like, oh, I'm ready to go. And so it's just become this innate thing. Yeah, it's going to cost you some results to begin with because you're going to use a lot of energy, but you are going to learn how to get that position. And this is if, of course, you don't have the magical lead-out man or a magical train to put you in position and unleash you. So that's the one thing I think that's, that it's definitely very beneficial. And it actually goes all the way up. Like I was teaching that even, at Isabel or Giacomo and Solo, or these guys didn't have a train with them at a race. It's remember, get yourself in that position first, then worry about the sprint. It really does work all the way down from World Tour, all the way down through your levels.
Is that something that came from your track background? Do you think that's, yeah?
100%. And you'll see all the good track riders so when Greipel and I hooked up, we clicked instantly for that reason. For me, finding the front was years and years and years being world champion on the track. It's like finding the front was easy. I didn't have 2,000 watts like Greipel. so when I was sprinting against him, I needed to get start. So, and then when we connected, he just 100% switched his brain, follow Greg. I would get him to the front. Bang, job done.
It's amazing to hear kind of how you see it from so many of us having watched it for years. Is there more love to track or road, or is it split for you deep in your heart? Where do you lean towards?
No, it was like a transition, I think, a natural transition. Everything was track there for a while. I wanted to be Olympic champion and I wanted to be world champion. And then now I want to have a really good crack at this road gig. I just knew that you have to spend so much time on the track. You build up, it's religious. It's 3-4 weeks, but then there's a camp also that you have to go to before. And then there's a camp halfway through the year. It really does. For me personally, it affected my road a lot. And it was just like, I don't want to have these average contracts on the road. I want to be the best that I can now at the roads. It was this switch. And once I did that, I think I still watch it a lot. I still keep up with the latest trends and you know, I love the aerodynamics that go. I love all the technology now. I mean, I follow it so much and so closely, but it's just, for me, it was, and I love them both the same. You know, to answer your question, there's no favorite. It's just how my career progressed and how I transferred from track to road, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's got to be some transition when you're, you know, world champ, then you're in world tour, leading out some of the best in the world. You go to all these grand tours, the Olympics. When you look back on the road career, what kind of just jumps out to you right now as I say, like, your road career? What were the brightest points for you? I mean, because there's just so it's like
Yeah.
head spinning, man.
No, I mean, you know, once I worked out, I think one of the things to remember when you're an athlete is work out what you're good at, but also be very aware of what you're not good at. At the high level, you can't be mediocre at everything. Like, at this world, you've got to be really, really good at one thing. I know that kind of sounds obvious, but you know, when I was in America racing, I could kind of climb with them and hang on and smoke everyone, but then I could line up in the bunch sprint and win a bunch sprint too, or then I could have a crack at the time trial and I'd go okay in the time trial also. It's like, but when you're at this extreme level, you have to really make a decision and go, right, I have to sprint here. And I worked a lot on that. Yeah, and it does affect your climbing and your threshold on that, because, you know, your capacity work that you're doing and sprint training, and you know, you even put on a little bit of muscle, obviously. So, you know, I did a lot of work there. So I think justifying that was when I think, you know, I won a stage of the Vuelta. You know, it's like it proved, and on that day, you know, Boonen was there, Oscar Freire was there, you know, all the celebrities of the racing back in those days were there, and I beat them all. You know, it's I think that was probably one of the big ones where I started to go, okay, I've found my spot now. You know, I'm consistent now. You know, and then I was that was on HTC, and I was still learning the trade there. Like, when I say learning the trade, like finding what I needed to be really good at to have a career in this game. And then that's when Sky snapped me up straight away, and I had, you know, a really successful year the next year. I won 9 races the next year, which is, you know, for a bike rider winning 9 big races, it's pretty good over here. You know, like, if you look at riders now, riders can do their whole career without even winning a bike race over here. So yeah, once I've worked it out, and yeah, you have to be really harsh on yourself, and, you know, self-critical, and, you know, really follow the process and believe in yourself. And definitely a lot of self-belief can creep in when you're that far out the back. You go, what am I doing here? You know, like, oh, yeah. So it's I think it was yeah, that was one of the big ones for me. I think, when I knew I was consistent too. You know, that was the other thing. Every day I could turn up, I'd be consistent. In January, from Tour Down Under, you know, winning stages there and 3rd overall there. Then in October, still racing well. I was a really consistent athlete. I didn't have these big fluctuations, and I just peaked for 2 races. I was definitely, I really enjoyed the training aspect along with the racing aspect, and I think that helps longevity in the sport. Because I had a really long career too. Like, I did my last Tour de France 41. You know, so I was like, there's not many people that have done that either. So it was, yeah, it was, what was I turning 41? I think I was probably turning 41. Maybe I was 40.
Either way, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, a testament to that was, I enjoyed the training. I enjoyed the racing. You know, I loved the sport, and, you know, I hadn't abused my body. It was like, you know, I was just, it was one of those, a combination of those things.
What do you think led to that consistency over when you're looking at individual seasons? Was it just like you love the whole process and that kept you going somehow? Or was there actually something in your training you think that just helped you keep ticking off solid results?
No, I just think, you know, I was quite lucky too. I'd go back to the Southern Hemisphere, so I wasn't having to train in the cold and the wet. So I'd go back to Aussie or New Zealand and train, train with mates. You know, I made it fun, but I made it hard. I think that was the key. You know, like nowadays I see these kids, you know, they'll go out with these list of intervals that they've got to do that fills up. It's, you know, like time and a place for that sort of thing, 100%. Like, you know, when you're really fine tuning the engine, 100%. But there's also times where go out and ride with your mates, you know, go and have your bunch sprint and your group ride and things like that. You know, I think that was what kept the fun in it for me.
When you think back and say, you know, the season's over, you go back and everyone, you know, is thinking probably, okay, this is his base training time, or this is kind of like the off season. What's the biggest chunk? Because a lot of people now listening here from the UK and the US, they're getting ready to go into that season. Maybe they're doing more gym work. How did you approach that, let's say, you know, October-ish through before a tour down under?
Yeah, so like I said, it's I would head back home to New Zealand, and we're just coming into summer. So it was starting to warm up, and yeah, half your mates are on the bike anyway. They wouldn't drag you out. So getting back, you know, I'd never have a month off. It would always be, I'd have 2 weeks off, maybe go on a holiday, you know, obviously, and relax and enjoy that. And then, you know, but then straight back into the gym, straight back on the bike. And yeah, like just, again, I was one of those consistent athletes. I would never put on 7 or 8 kilos, and then obviously I'd put on 5 maybe, you know. There's no way I could be bothered trying to strip 7 or 8 kilos. You know? It's not like I watched my AD. I was just active, you know. Swimming, gymming, I don't know, playing some basketball, whatever. You know, just active on the water skiing, whatever we were doing. You know, it's like it was just keeping myself active.
What's the gym routine that you recall the most of? And actually, my second question that would be, do you think that's more because you were in like the sprint train type rider, or would you have done this no matter, like, do you like the gym, or do you feel like it was super beneficial to the cycling?
No, I found it really beneficial. I really did. It really does help with your muscular endurance, actually. Like, the stronger that muscle is, you know, and for any given force it has to contract, you know, it's costing less energy. I also like the injury, well, lack of injury, you know, all your intrinsic muscles, all those tiny, like if you're doing, you know, back squat, you know, reps on that, as opposed to, I mean, I'll still do leg press and things like that, I guess, but I'm just saying, like, injury prevention was a big one also. You know, you're just strong throughout, you know, if you've got your weight on your back, you're just strong throughout, everywhere. And it was just something you could do, you know, like, everyone was, you know, it wasn't always a hypertrophy phase. I was, you know, I would do low reps, you know, of 4, maybe 5, but I'd do quite a few sets. So I wouldn't go lactic and start, you know, going into the hypertrophy phase. I didn't want to put on size. You know, a lot of people are always concerned about whether they're going to put on size in the gym, and I just don't think doesn't necessarily happen like that if you train the correct way. And it was something, you know, I've done it since I was a kid. I'm very comfortable in the gym. University, I did advanced strength and conditioning. So, you know, I have a lot of knowledge in the gym, and I can see, you know, my technique. I can help people also in the gym, you know, with our younger athletes. Anytime they want to, you know, jump in the gym and just see what their form is. But it's also, I think, the key to the gym training is finding exercises that work for you that correlate to a position, kind of a movement that you would use on the bike. You know, I'm a big, I really enjoy the strength training on the bike also, you know, your low RPM stuff and your torque training and things like that, but there's also still a place for that gym workout stuff. If it can cross relate, and a lot of it does, you know, there's a lot of cool exercises out there now that it does transfer across into the cycling, no question.
I see you hesitating to think of the words, but I think anyone who rides and lifts knows that feeling of like when you're doing maybe a single leg Romanian deadlift and then you're actually like really smashing on the pedal, especially on a climb. The brain is like, oh, this is that gym work. It just
100%.
You can feel it.
Yeah.
I try to pass that on to friends that don't lift. I'm like, man, you just gotta commit to this for 4 months and see the difference of your body and how it feels, and you will feel the lifts that work for you on the bike, like no doubt, if you're doing it the right way, I think. But I know everybody doesn't agree with that, but that's all right.
That's spot on. I totally agree with that, mate. It's exactly, it's like you said, a couple of the really good exercises that you just, when you're on the bike and you just go, and you go, there you go.
Like that is the gym. It's the guys back at Fast Cap were the first ones to really get me to commit to that. And you were out there in Colorado at some point, I believe. Did you live in Boulder, or were you just passing through or something?
I lived there when I raced in America, and then I would always come back and do an altitude camp. I'd stay up in Ned, but I was always at Fast Cap. I'd be on there in the ergo. On the ergo there with oxygen, doing my 40, doing my 40-20, so I could,
That's so funny. Yeah, Jason Hillermeyer, I don't know if he was one of the coaches out there. He was a buddy of mine that we had raced together in upstate New York, and then he moved out there to work with Frank, and we might have done, what was it, bus stop ride?
Oh, yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. I went out to visit him one time, and he was sending me out to the local Smash Fest. Some of the Dewey Solar guys were there, and I can't remember everybody, but yeah, it was good times.
You can see how, like, my eyes light up when I talk about the bus stop ride, because it's just a bunch ride. But I'm here as a World Tour pro riding for Sky, line up on a Tuesday and a Thursday because I love to go. I might have gone out and done 5 hours in the mountains beforehand, but then to keep it fun, it's a hard session. They're so fast, and then you just get to empty yourself. And again, going back into this longevity in the sport, I just think keeping it fun really did help me.
That's awesome. That's a really good tip for everybody, no matter where they are in the levels of cycling. Because it's got to be fun no matter what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
When you were talking about the HTC days, and were there any mentors that you recall really kind of? You said you were still trying to figure out your craft and figure out yourself as a cyclist, which is always interesting for us amateurs to hear someone at the highest level on, at that point in time, arguably the best team in the world, and you're like, oh, I'm still like kind of figuring my game out here. Who was sort of helping you develop that personality and where you're trying to go in the sport? Because you're probably like 5 years in, maybe, if I have it correct at that, that level. Like you had some seasoning, but clearly still trying to figure yourself out. How did that work?
It was kind of whether I'd just stick to this leading out or have a crack at being a sprinter myself. That was what I wanted to really figure out. I mean, I knew I was good at leading out. I could do that with my eyes closed, find myself at the front of the peloton in a bunch sprint. But there was guys like Roger Hammond. He was really easy to talk to, and he didn't have the biggest engine either. But he found ways to win bike races and just be super consistent. Also, I ran a lot with Mick Rogers, and he's a very intelligent guy, and he had a lot of time for me. And he'd been a pro for years, and totally different athletes, but same sort of mindset. He's a really good fella, and that grip between the teeth type thing to try and win a bike race. And he would help me point in the right direction, and then I linked up with Greipel. I got on with it. To begin with, we actually had a few stern words because and I put it down to actually the DSs in the team at the time, because we went to tour of Georgia together and we weren't given specific roles. We were both told we can sprint, whereas I would never have that on my team because it just causes too much friction. And I was on fire on tour of Georgia, and I won 3 stages or something in the sprint jersey, and there was a big row the Greipel had. He was upset, and but we sorted it out. I went to the Vuelta with him. It's a funny story actually. So I went to the Vuelta that year with him, and he had won, multiple races. He was a faster sprinter than me. I'm not going to deny that fact, and I don't have an ego at all. He's a freaking fast sprinter. And we went to the Vuelta, and I worked with him up till then, leading him out. We were clicking together nicely, and this is the measure of a really good DS. So we did this stage, and he left. I was supposed to be leading him out, and he left my wheel. And I looked around at about 400 to go, and he wasn't there. I'm like, well, it's too late for me to go back for him now. And so I just followed the wheel that I was on at the launch and won. And then, of course, he's upset because he's left the wheel. And then the Danish DS, Brian Holm, he sits us down and goes, Greipel, do not leave the Mad Kiwis wheel ever again. And he's like, okay, carry on. Mate, we went on 5 stages of the Vuelta that year in the green jersey.
Dude, that's awesome.
The Greipel did not leave my wheel again.
Did he see other people like passing by and like jump on someone else's train, or did he ever say why he abandoned ship?
He would get lost every now and then, or he wouldn't follow through a gap, and he wouldn't vocalize it. Yeah, that was always one thing, mate. If you lose me, let me know. I'll stop. I'll wait. I'll come back. Or if something was going faster down that side. This is way back in the early days. This we learned all this as we became best friends and built the best lead out in the world. We learned all this. A train goes down the right hand side. You're tempted to, I'll go there because I know that sprinter, and then we're on this side. It's like, so it's just small things like that happen still. You see it still happening in the pro peloton. And then once you go, hang on, we've got Seberg here, we've got Henderson, and it was like, okay, here we go.
How long do you feel like it takes to really gel between like a lead out man and the sprinter, or even if it's a few people as a lead out train? And can you really do that in training, or does this have to just be race after race after race?
How long does it take? Probably until you win the first race.
Fair enough.
Because once you win that first one, you're like, because everyone gets that confidence. Everyone builds on each other, Another really cool story I often share is we had this train with Jürgen Rollins, incredible classics rider, super fast, Seberg in front of him, Adam Hansen, myself. And it was just one of those random thoughts that we had. We did this lead out, and I was on Jürgen's wheel going, oh my goodness, I can't possibly go when he pulls off. I am so much like this. And then, so we got on the bus. Anyway, Greipel won. Got on the bus afterwards, and I just happened to bring it up in the debrief. I said, Yogi, mate, you were that strong. I didn't think it was possible for you to get out of my seat once you. And he goes, oh. And then Greipel said, Hendy, you were going that fast. He goes, I didn't even know how I was going to sprint. And then Jürgen was like to Seberg. And Seberg, when he went, I was like, how am I going to do my job? So it was this off-the-cuff connection that we had. It was like, he's suffering as much as I'm suffering. We are riding ourselves through a brick wall to get there. Everyone is on the absolute limit. It was just this, and we just clicked as a unit. I know he is giving 100% in front of me. I know he's suffering so much on the wheel, and he's still going to get. And it was a really cool moment. And we'd won a lot of races before then, but I never mentioned it. And I just happened to sit down and say, I didn't think I was going to be able to sprint then. I honestly didn't think I was going to be able to sprint. And you were going so fast in front of me. And then everyone did the same thing. You were going so fast. No, you were going so fast.
Do you feel like that helped you guys then, even down the road? Because now everyone, like, you were just even more of a unit.
Exactly, mate. Exactly. We just knew, like, everyone is in this. Everyone is 100% committed. Everyone is suffering. Like, you can't go any harder. Questioning, how am I going to sprint now for 300 meters? I don't think it's possible. So yeah, no, it really did help us bond as brothers,
It's such an awesome bond in cycling. I think of other sports that I've played growing up, and just, when when your teammate's going to counterattack, when your teammate's going to pull off. You just learn these things about your team. Like the choreography without it being planned is so incredible. And I'm sure there's other sports that have this, but I was playing more like basketball, baseball, things like that. It just, a little bit in basketball for sure, but there's something about cycling, that link with your teammates when you gel is just, it's incredible. It's like such a good brotherhood that you said. Yeah, I love to hear that coming up at your level as well.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. No, it's just a nice lesson to learn, and that, it's as hard as you're going, and like, I could pass that information on to youngsters. Like, often when you're suffering in a bike race, I promise you, you're not the only person in that peloton right now suffering. Like everyone around you is suffering. You just have to be confident to know, yeah, you're on the limit, but just trust me, you are not the only one. There's multiple people around you suffering. So you just got to hurt more. You just got to be more of a mongrel and hurt more than them, and you'll get a better result. It's just that confidence to know you're not the only one here suffering, mate. You're not Robinson Crusoe.
Love that. Speaking of passing on information to the younger athletes and athletes that you're working with, there's a lot of science in the sport now, which is a great thing, but there's also a lot of stuff that just experience has taught athletes like yourself. And sometimes it gets called bro science. I'm curious if there's any sort of things that you really believe are like, this makes you faster. There's no data. There's nothing, but Greg Henderson knows, dude, you do this, add this to your training, this works for most people. Is there any of that you can share that you just still believe in?
Yeah, okay. I just have I could break this down in a few things. Like, for me, it would be like the hell ride on Saturday morning. I just knew that if I could ride off the front of the hell ride, I was on for the season. I was going to have I don't know if that sort of answers the question. That bro science. Like, I know that if I did 4 by 20 minutes strength efforts in the big gear, I knew, okay, if I get through this with reasonable power, I've got good legs. I guess that's the only unquantifiable thing. Like, I often quantified my training. There was, when I was young, before power meters and that, there was a loop we did, quite a hilly loop. You could get around that in the big chain ring, that sort of thing. But I don't know, what's an example of bro science?
No, that's actually the high torque, the low cadence work is really good, because that's still, people argue both ways. And, my friends and I, for our own training, we're big believers in it. Excuse me. And people say, hey, I do this training, I feel like I have another gear. It just develops this like power.
Yeah, I agree.
No great data about it, but tons of pros do it. People that do it really believe in it. And I'm always sort of the mindset, hey, if someone's really adamant about something, I want to at least hear them out and maybe give it a shot. So I'd be curious of more details on that for your big gear work. What do you go by cadence? Do you go by a gear? Like, what are you doing for a session like that back in the day? Or maybe if you're still doing it today?
Yeah, I would go by cadence, and it would be really low. Like, it was, almost knee breaking stuff. But I think you develop
like 40, 50?
Yeah.
Oh, wow,
45, okay. 40, 45 RPM. And I would just lock in, and there would be no upper body noise at all. So it was just straight dry, and you could just feel it. I used to, like, when I write these programs, I'd call it hamstring from bone, because you weren't allowed to hold onto the handlebars. Like, you had to just, so, you imagine your pedal stroke, you want to force it down, but if you train them with discipline and just absolutely hamstring glute, because your quads do the work anyway, like, they're going to push down. But if you could strengthen and train that part of your pedal stroke, mate, when you held the handlebars, I reckon your watts went 40 just instantly, and you just felt so strong on the bike. And that's some of the efforts that it's hard to explain to someone. If I had an athlete gear, I could show them how to do it and This is how it's supposed to feel. Yes, and don't worry about your power right now because your power's going to sink. Don't worry about that right now. It'll come up as you get used to this pedal stroke of just light hands, no gripping. And then, once you get really, really good at this, then you put in some power. And you do longer. If I would do, say, 3x20, 4x20 of the no gripping. But then as you move closer and you've done, maybe, I don't know, a month of that, say 2 sessions a week for a month, you would then integrate 1 5x5. So 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off, but holding on. And you just made, like you said, you had another gear. It was just like, wow.
I mean, that's a perfect example, because when someone says, oh, well, Greg Henderson said I felt strong, there's people now who are like, well, where's the data? And it's like, dude, what?
Yeah.
Like, this isn't a lab. This is one of the best cyclists in the world telling you this makes you stronger. You should try it. And I love the science, but I think sometimes it's just over obsessed right now in our sport. But anyways, what's then kind of similar thought of like training? Is there something that you see most of these young athletes wanting to do, or what's like really, there's always, kind of things that come in vogue and out of vogue, and there's polarized and there's this and that, or are people pretty much like bread and butter, doing long rides, hitting some intensity, going and racing? What do you see with the Remby team?
Well, I mean, there's a lot's changed, as you'll know, over the last 10 years, for cert. But some things have stayed the same. And let's be honest, and hard work, there's just no substitute for hard work. So when you say long rides, yeah, of course, people are still doing these long rides, but it's now this, this zone 2 stuff that you're on the pedals all day. It's not coffee shop riding, over under stuff, like clearing lactate. Everyone can do threshold effort, right? I go out and do your 3x20. Absolutely. But why not try and load yourself with a bit of lactic first? Try and clear that, try and flush that while you're riding just below threshold. Just makes, there's a time and a place for that. It's just very, very structured training these days. There's not a lot of junk miles. There's not a lot of just riding around looking at the sights. You're out there for a reason. There's the age-old debate of, do you train the system or do you train specificity of the race coming up? And I think there's a time and a place for everything. Early season, train the system that you want to train. If you've got a 1-day race coming up and you're going up this climb 10 times, go and train a climb that's similar to it 10 times. Get the feel for it. How your legs going to feel. Again, another thing I wish I'd done more of as an athlete was doing my intervals later in my ride. I did a lot of 5-minute work and sprinting at the end because it was very close to what we were doing when we lead out. There's the thing about a lead out probably a lot of people don't realize is your 5-minute power had to be huge at the end of a race. I would be averaging 500, 550 watts for 5 minutes, and then then sprinting. That's the big difference at the World Tour level, is how fast it was so far out. So you train for that. You would, at the end of your ride, 5 hours, you would go and do 3x5 or 4x5 max efforts. Just try and do that capacity. But I think it's really important to do that also. Your longer efforts, no question. Anaerobic reserve, it's so important in this game. And I wish I'd done more of that as an athlete, because I prescribe it quite a bit now.
So would it be logical to say then, maybe as you're talking about training the system, bring those numbers up? Let's say, use your 5-minute example. Bring your 5-minute up to what you think your max is, increase it a little bit from wherever you were before. But when you're at that point when you might just be repeating the same power, shift it to the end of the ride and then start getting in these efforts that you're talking about, end of the day. And you use the word feel. I think that is so underrated, of know what that is going to feel like
100%.
when you go to the race, because it's sure as hell going to feel a lot different than when you're fresh. And
absolutely.
Is that like an accurate maybe way for athletes to play around with this?
you're spot on, mate. Spot on. And like, again, cycling it's not one dimensional. Like, there's a time and a place for everything. So absolutely, when you want to really test the system and really push some big numbers, do it, do an hour warm up and then go and smash your effort. When your numbers are high, start shifting that to the end of the ride. If you can produce that at the end of the ride, mate, you're going to be an amazing bike rider, and it's hard to do because it's up here too. Like, you have to switch this on and go, this is going to feel horrible from the first pedal stroke. Whereas if you do it in the first hour, you might get 1 or 2 minutes where it feels, oh, this is okay, I'm in control here. But at the end of 5 hours, it feels horrible from the first pedal stroke. But you have to get used to that psychologically. You can get used to that.
I love that. That's a really good, not always talked about, like the mental side of the end of the bike race or the group, for anybody going to your group ride. Your group ride might be 90 minutes. That's different than when you do them in the first 30 minutes. Everybody's got to grow into where they're going. You obviously talked about the gym. I'm curious, is there anything else off the bike that you felt like can really increase performance? And maybe it's also like increase your recovery, which increases your performance, or anything that, just when I say off the bike, what are you kind of thinking about?
Yeah, I like the sauna a lot. I did a lot of sauna, whether it was specifically for heat training, heat shock proteins, stimulate hypoxic. I guess I did a lot of that. I enjoyed that. And I used to always do it after training also, when your engine's already hot. So you're at a high core temperature anyway. Again, sauna training, I think, is different to just, if I was doing heat training for a race, I would be doing it in a warm environment, and exercising and getting that cardiovascular stress in the hot environment. But I still just think sauna is really good for you. A lot of health benefits, wide ranging, I think. What else was it? Other than the gym,
sorry to cut you off. Is that like just jump in for like 20 minutes after a ride, or half an hour?
Be a half hour. Be a half an hour. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I would come home and I'll do my recovery drink and whatnot. And while I'm doing that, I'd switch the sauna on and then just jump in there and try and relax. But again, by the end of half an hour, it's an effort, and like you could add that as another 30 minutes to your day, because it's, it doesn't take long, but man, it makes a difference, And again, like, I don't know what you think about this, but like, I'm a real big believer in the psychological aspect of learning to suffer, like being comfortable suffering. Like, you just have to, you just got to be able to like almost switch that switch off in your brain and go, I don't care how hard it is or how much it hurts, I'm going to get there. And when you have that mindset, your numbers in training might not be flash or I mean, I can name multiple bike riders that you see their data in a lab or on train, and it's just, and they're okay bike riders, but you put a finish line in front of them, they become a different beast. And I'm just such a big advocate of like race on feel, know what it feels like, and get used to it being uncomfortable, because cycling's not easy.
I love that, man. I think the mental side, I realize it's, we're in a sport with now power meters, heart rate monitors, all these things that we can measure. It's very hard to measure this type of thing. So I think that's maybe why it doesn't get as much, I don't want to say love, but like people talk about it, but it's hard to like really put it in there. But I think, for like the amateurs who they're in their city, they're one of the top dogs. I'm like, you don't waste your time going and beating up on everybody. You're one of the fastest people. Go ride 3 hours and now go try and beat up on everybody. Go get that feel of what it's gonna be like when you race your equivalent. There's now 80 of you out there. And I just think that type of thing is, people want to see the big numbers. And after 3 hours, they're not going to put out a PR, but that's not what we're going for. We're going for feel that, what Greg's talking about, that 5 minutes at the end of the day when you're like, oh, okay, I need to do this lead out and then sprint. Damn. Okay.
They're addicted nowadays, to the young fellas, to like their Garmin's and like the information on their head units. Now, a funny story, last year on Black Spoke, we're in this race in Italy, and it was pouring rain, and one of the riders' head units had blown to bits in the in the water. He's called me up, Greg, my head unit's gone. I don't know where the top is. Where's the top? I don't know where it is. And he's freaking out. I said, hey mate, come down. When the road flattens like that and starts to go down, you've reached the top, mate. He was just mind blown that I was so casual and so calm. Like, he could not cope that he didn't know where the top of the climb was and how far to go. Mate,
That's
when
wild.
It flattens off, you've reached the top, buddy.
Little bit of common sense goes a long way from Greg. That's amazing.
She's quite funny.
It's the head units. I mean, I love the technology. I don't want to sound like I don't like it, but yeah, there's, athletes that are so, the Garmin didn't load the workout and I couldn't remember the exact number. So I just went home. I'm like, dude, what? What do you like? You could, you rode 45 minutes. You could have rode endurance. You could have done anything except for go home. That was disappointing, but I think it's a good learning experience that some people have to go through.
Yeah. That's
so
classic.
That actually might be one of the questions I was curious. What's overrated in cycling these days? Maybe it's the technology. What else do you think is kind of just a little bit overhyped?
I think there's a lot of hype around how fast a bike frame is. Yeah, it's something that just I really sort of scratch my head at. I'm like, this day and age, there's not a slow bike frame. Like, they're all cut from the same cloth. It's about your position on the bike. It's about, it's about your efficiency on the bike. It's about your clothing, your nutrition. It's like, these are the big chunks of the pie. I just don't believe, I just think people worrying about how fast and how light their road bike is, you could spend a lot more energy elsewhere and get way more bang for your buck than these. I just am convinced that these fast road bikes, they're all within, what do we say in England and New Zealand? They're all within a bee's dick, mate. And yeah, it's true though. Like, if you take them to the tunnel, there's not a lot in it. But if you're optimized elsewhere, clothing, booties, socks, whatever you are, nutrition for me is a huge one. You're going to get some huge gains in that area. I think that for me is definitely an overrated area of cycling right now.
What going on the nutrition? What do you feel are like the biggest bullet points that people should know about if they're not already crossing those T's and dotting those I's?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it now. Like back in my day, like to try and get 90 grams, mate, I would be straight to the toilet on 90 grams of carbs an hour. But now I've done it myself with these new products and these new drinks, these new gels. I can do 120 without any issue at all. And it's a game changer. So it's the nutrition is so good these days. There's really no excuse not to be hitting on your hard days, your 120 grams, 110 grams, Sure, on easier days, maybe you only need 60 to 90, which is fine. It goes with racing also. With the easier, you don't need to be pounding 120, but if you're a big day in the mountains, you've got 4 or 5 coals to go over the Giro or the Tour, absolutely you need to be smoking 120 grams an hour. But you can just do it now. Like, it's actually, back in the day, you'd be on the toilet straight away after the race, if you were lucky after the race, not during the race.
Are there any specific, do you feel like all the products are relatively similar, or anything that you lean towards? Or I'm sure you guys have like a team sponsor, feel free to plug them if you want, but should anybody just be getting what they have access to?
No, there is a difference in products, no question. Yeah, I mean, I'm not affiliated really with anyone, so I know a product that works well for a lot of athletes. is that Morton. They seem to have the science quite well, quite sorted. But I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of products out there now that are copied or within, QE of what they're doing now. So I think there's so many good products on the market now. It's just amount, just make sure there's enough sodium in it to go along with it, because, the last thing you need to be doing is having all this energy and cramping along the way. Your 2-to-1 glucose fructose, I guess that works for a lot of people or thereabouts. Just make sure that the formulas aren't a mile off,
Mm-hmm.
And then to briefly touch on it, the other thing I tell my young athletes is there's a lot of good food out there too, that you don't have to spend, hundreds of dollars on these top nutritional products, which, you might use for a race and race situations, and once, and train on it for a while to get used to it. But then there's actually good food out there. You can just use normal food, or even some Haribo. You can see the pros, they just dive into the Haribo or candy. So it's like, it doesn't all have to be the top of the line nutritional products that you use. But in training, I would definitely try and get your gut used to these high carbohydrate loads. It definitely makes a difference. It makes a huge, I know for a fact, it makes a huge difference. It's the rate limiting factor. At the end of the day, the rate limiting factor is your energy, ATP, isn't it? So as much as you can process, the better you're going to be.
That's awesome. What do you think is the difference that you've seen, maybe from your own racing days or for athletes that you're working with, that when they're shifting sort of from the amateur ranks into the lower level pro racing? I mean, now you have people going amateur to world tour, so that, is there like a mindset shift, or what's really the amateur versus pro difference? Obviously, besides the watch, do you see anything that's like mentally mindset? Or, I mean, it just seems like such a different world when it truly becomes their job, their profession. What do athletes have to do to sort of excel in that environment?
I think one of the big difference I see is it's basically what you touched on there, is they accept that it's my job. So everything you do and everything you think about is geared towards performance. So how did you sleep? I mean, there's so many wearables, there's so many ways to track, so many data, women. But I think what I'm trying to say is, once they realize it's their job, it's recovery, it's the right food, it's going to bed at a normal time and a consistent time. It's all these things that add up over time that make them realize and make them a better athlete on the whole. I think that's the switch that people make. It's like what you touched on, when they realize it's their job and they're doing it full time. Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of amateurs, they're at school, for 6 hours a day or 7 hours a day. They've got an afternoon job that they have to go and do, which is absolutely, I totally agree with that. When you're a kid, you've got these other life, you want a social life, you've got mates you want to hang out with. So it's tying all these things in. And of course, something has to give eventually. And it probably comes in the recovery or the sleep or training hours. But just to repeat myself, I think it's when they click, this is my job, this is the direction I'm heading, everything then gears, your brain just gears towards, because you're not, and another thing I often talk about is with cycling, they think, okay, you go out at 9 o'clock, you're home by 3, you've done your training, day over. It doesn't work like that. Like the whole day, you've got these efforts that you're doing. Okay, training's training, whatever that entails. You come home, straight into the recovery or sauna. Recovery, am I recovering? While you're recovering, you're thinking, how did that today go? How did I feel? So then you evaluate it, and you might be on your training peaks looking, how did I go up here? How was my, okay. So it's all consuming, like cycling or professional sport, I should say, not cycling. Professional sport is all consuming. You are thinking about, and then you go to bed or you have your dinner, you start thinking about, what have I got for tomorrow's training? So then you're still thinking about your bloody training. It's like, and then you've got a race coming up. What's the demands of this race? What's my job? What's my role at this race? So it's really all consuming. I think that's one of the big things that trips a lot of the young fellas up is, oh, this is hard. Like cycling is hard.
Mm-hmm. Comes back to what you said 30 minutes ago. It's got to be fun, because otherwise that is just not sustainable. Like if you got to enjoy that training, the recovery, thinking about the next day, thinking about how can I get better? How did I do on that climb? Like I think anybody who has a spouse in this sport, they're like, oh my God, we shut up about cycling for a minute. It's like, it's hard not to just keep it going. But that's a really good tip, though, that I think resonates even more for, most people listening to this are going to be amateurs for their life. And, when you start to get into training, you're maybe like 3 years in. I've tried to tell people, I'm like, hey, you're still a newbie at this. Like, don't take that as a diss. But when you plateau a little bit and you're starting to search for like, how do I get better? That should excite you, because you're really just getting going. Like, don't stop when it gets hard. Just embrace that, and you'll be amazed where you're at in 7 years and 10 years and whatever. So I think that advice for the pros, future pros, is applicable to all of us. So
I agree. Yeah, no, you're spot on there, mate.
Man, Greg, this was awesome, dude. This is I didn't want we've crossed paths a few times, and you've actually been in a story that I have to share with you, because you just seem like as I said, a straight shooter, and I absolutely love it. There was that Fort McClellan race. You were, the race played out, I don't know if you know the Padilla brothers, but it was like you, Julio, I think I came across maybe Brendan Rim, who still races with Project Echelon, and I couldn't tell if you were trying to get rid of Julio or if you guys were trying to get rid of me, because I was this nobody amateur guy. And we finally get down to the end of the race, and it's you and me, and this is the race probably does not even matter to you. And I'm like, holy shit, I think I might be able to get a top 10 here. I'm like, holy shit, that's Greg Henderson. I'm going to spring Greg Henderson right now. And I got to see what a World Tour rider does, because you probably were not even going. You were just like, see ya. And I was like, okay, see you later, man. And it was like the story that I got to tell people. I was like, dude, I was right with Greg Henderson, man. It was incredible. And just you showing up to all those events had inspired so many people. Like you just being in the US, you talking about going to the bus stop ride. I hope you realize how many like athletes you just got hyped to be like, dude, it's Greg Henderson. So to be able to have this conversation with you, man, and to share all the input that you have for so many riders, I hope you keep doing it. It's you've inspired so many people, and yeah, I just really appreciate you taking time to come on the podcast too.
No, mate, you're way too kind, and no, I appreciate those kind words, and that's what we're all here for, and riding our bikes, having fun, and sharing the knowledge, and that's what I love doing. And I really appreciate you having me on, and it was great. I'm glad I didn't you didn't see my angry heady side on the bike. It does come out every now and then.
It's racing. It's sometimes the sparks are flying when it's competition, but
it's all good fun, mate.
We'll post the your Instagram handle so people can follow along there. Is there any other places on social media that you're at, like Twitter or?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. X Greg Henderson 1.
Okay. And
it's about
any blogging or anything like that, or pretty much just Instagram and X?
Instagram and X. Yeah, that's me, mate.
Awesome. Hey, man, thanks so much for doing this. Everybody,
thank you.
Good luck with your training and racing, and we'll talk to you all soon.